Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course Environmental Impact Assessment. In the previous part of the lecture, like we did part 1, we covered biophysical impact, and in part 2 we will look at the other form of impact. So we'll be looking at socio-economic impact, we'll also look at the health and safety, then we'll look at some of the emerging impact areas where we have started looking into equality, deprivation, indigenous people's rights and traditional areas. We'll look at culture and language, how we have started looking into it, and then land acquisition, resettlement and livelihood, and also look at the climate change, ecosystem services, which I had mentioned. And then we'll also look at some of the wider impact considerations such as risk and resilience. Further, according to this, the learning outcome which is expected from you, that you should be able to discuss the concept, purpose, significance and pattern of socio-economic impact. You should be able to talk about the concept of health and safety. Then further you should be able to discuss about the emerging impact areas. You should review in what context we are talking about, why we are talking about, and how the EIA process is improving here. So you would be required to reflect a lot and connect with the previous week's lectures here. And further we'll look into the, you will be able to review, synthesize what kind of wider impact considerations we are making, like the risk, resilience and cumulative impact. So the key reference for this chapter is 10 from EIA Impact Areas, Current and Emerging from the book Introduction to Environmental Impact Assessment by John Glasson and Ricky Terrible. So looking at the socioeconomic impact, there are no standards for socioeconomic assessment. Mostly the projects have considerable positive economic impact and are quantifiable. The impact may include job creations at different levels. So you can have jobs which are like directly coming from the development activity which you are taking, and there are certain jobs which come indirectly, as many of these have multiplier impacts. For example, requirement for one activity would require support services to come in, then there might be training activities, the capacity building activities, so the entire community would get benefit from that. So that is usually considered in this domain. There can be numerous social issues related to the quality of life and well-being, such as there can be crime level with any activity coming in. It can go down or it can go up, and then there can be community stress and conflict also. So there can be serious concerns about community participations. All these things are also considered here, and there can be concerns for human rights and then also for environmental justice. So whether the human rights are being violated, their participation, their consent has been taken for any kind of change happening there. So these issues can vary a lot as per the acceptance of the new development by the local community. So what's really their acceptance level? So within this domain, one looks at the population change. So any kind of development activity, if it will happen, that would lead to the population change. And while studying this, we create and analyze causal link of population change to the area. So what kind of population change would happen, and then what kind of further change it would lead to. And based on that change, review is done of the basic services and the quality of life in that particular area. These impact can be of concern when changes like increase in population are higher than the threshold capacities of the environment in which they are set up, and creates pressure on the local resources. So that can be a concern. And also when the local community is not able to cope up with the change in the population, the demographic change in that particular place. So now moving on, looking at the health and safety concern, we see that there's increasing in this particular domain. We look into health impact assessment also. So we're going to learn about the methods involved in this. So health impact assessment is emphasized a lot now. Health, when we talk about health, we cover the social, economic, culture and physiological well-being of the receiving community and their ability to adapt to the projected change in the daily life. So what kind of change will happen and whether they will be able to adapt to this particular change or not. So we look at the health and not just the absence of disease, but then also like adaptability to all the changes which are going to take place there. So there are negative as well as positive health impacts. Health impacts refer to change in the existing health status of a population within a defined geographical area over a specified period of time. So that is how we define as health impact. And when we do health impact assessments, we have a range of procedures and methods which can be adopted, and these methods and procedures can help us to improve the policy. Then it can also help us to plan the project and then also to align various programs with it. So it's a very important area which we're looking at, and then the assessment can really help us to modify a lot of things, improve a lot of things. In many countries, health impact assessment is very established and is progressive, so it's also evolving, such as you can see in Canada, Netherlands, Australia and UK. You see that they have very set procedures to undertake that. And through health impact assessment, it is possible to review how there can be varied impact of the policy or the project. So not just the project, the physical component, but you can also review the policy on the population. Or you can also look at certain subgroups of the population, like you can look at what impact it will have on women, what impact it will have on elderly or children or so on. So looking at the emerging impact areas, so that was about the socio-economic impact areas. Now we're going to look into what are the various emerging impact areas. So as we all know that our understanding in AIA is continuously increasing. So I had said that whenever we study this subject, we have to understand it from the perspective that it's constantly evolving. So therefore, there are some emerging and important criteria we see in AIA. So we see areas such as equality, deprivation, culture and language, where we are reviewing. Then we are also looking at land acquisition, resettlement and livelihoods. We are also looking at now climate change and then ecosystem services, which I talked in the previous classes as well. So reflecting upon equality and deprivation, so it is usually noted that any development, so when we talk about or think about any kind of development that does not have blanket impact. So what does that mean? That means that if there's a benefit for one, then it might not be same benefit for everyone, and it might not be true that all might be benefited. Some might be at loss because of that particular development, or similar. And then the impact varies a lot from people to people, from community to community. Some group might benefit, like they will have increased livelihood options, their income might increase, whereas some might have loss in income due to change in the landscape, or their access to their livelihood might be blocked. And some might be displaced for the larger public benefit. So the impact can really vary and can be drastic in nature. So because of such variations, there are rising concerns of equality. So we are really concerned about equality and concerns about certain areas of community receiving increasing environmental burdens. So some of the segments of people have been constantly being displaced or have been at loss and have been under risk and becoming trapped in the vicious cycle of decline. So that's the problem which we are encountering. So mostly we have been hearing about displacement of indigenous people for many of the projects, and also we see fragmentation of their resources, that no longer they are able to access the resources they used to access before. So the key sectors typically considered, we see under these which have larger impact, include age, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, disability, and sexual orientation. Although other dimension could also include rural versus urban, poor versus rich, or people with or without cars. So what could really happen if they have mobility or they don't have access to mobility? There are also legal framework, such as now you have Equality Act in UK, which makes provision to review differently abled people while reviewing the impact. So these frameworks are available now. There is also Index of Multiple Deprivation. So IMD is also available to review such kind of things. So also infringements infringement meaning action of breaking law of human right is of strong concern in EIA. So human rights are it's wide ranging, but especially when we are concerned about EIA, it is linked with labor, land, property, and freedom from discrimination. And they are seen as of particular significance in impact assessment. So one of the project example of human rights impact assessment is Marlin Gold Mine development in Guatemala, where human right assessment was undertaken. However, such cases are limited, so not many. In many cases, this is done. The link to the report is provided to you for a detailed study if you are interested. You may also find web-based tools. So there are tools which are available to really work out the community-based human right impact assessment, and this you can get it with the training manual. I've provided the list for you here. Community-based human rights impact assessment. So that's another area. Now moving forward, we see that culture and language is also increasingly covered within EIA. So we are even considering this, not just the biophysical aspect, but also looking at the culture and language impact assessment. So when we look at cultural impact assessments, what do we really mean by that? So it's said to be a process of evaluating the likely impact of a proposed development on the way of life. So culture is a complex subject here. Way of life of a particular group or community of people, with full involvement of this group or community of people, and possibly undertaken by this group or community of people. So the way of life, what is that? We'll look into, and how the proposed development is going to influence that. So when we review culture, we see that the culture is both tangible and intangible elements. And when we say that it's tangible, where we see clothing, building elements, instruments, and so on, and intangible, where we see languages, oral tradition, performing arts, and so on. So culture has these both tangible and intangible components. And while doing impact assessments, we generally see the historic environment, we evaluate the monuments, we evaluate the heritage building and sites, and so on. And we also, while seeing the intangible, we look at the values, belief system, customary laws, and so on. But in practice, it is seen that mostly the tangibles are reviewed more compared to the intangible. And we may also see that the CIA, the Culture Impact Assessment review, is made for both positive and negative impact. So it can have both negative as well as positive impact. So many of the recent work on culture impact assessment is regarding the indigenous communities. So a lot of work has been done in that, and in it especially potential impacts are identified over the major resource development project, and especially in cases like mining, energy generation and processing, as well as for the dam project. And we see that countries have developed guidelines for it. So you may find guidelines and examples in like Canada, Australia and New Zealand. For reference, you can find Canadian Mackenzie Valley Review Board guidelines developed for evaluation purpose, and this link I have provided for you here. So you can see all the guidelines which are available to see the impact assessment. So you will also find guidelines provided by New Zealand government guidance on culture impact assessment under the Resource Management Act. So that's also given to you here. So we also look at a case study, the link which I have given you. Assessment report is on the case which we are seeing here is on the liquefied natural gas processing plant in Browse Basin in Kimberley region of Western Australia. I've given you the link here. So here the regional Aboriginal, the indigenous people land organization was responsible for addressing indigenous impact. So they were responsible for undertaking that, and they specifically saw how the kind of development was impacting the indigenous people as part of the overall impact assessment process. So we find other upcoming examples of cultural impact assessment in other parts of the world also. So we get to see that also. And we are also seeing that language is also being taken up more and more. So people are also taking a language impact assessment. So language is considered to be very important indicator of a culture. So if the language survives, the culture survives. So language impact assessment involves like a very systematic criteria based assessments of likely impact of a development or a project on the language and the community. So you can see the current example in relation to the proposed nuclear power station developed in Wales. So one of the case examples shared with you is in Walfa, Newed at Anglesey in North Wales. Anglesey in North Wales. It is one of the nuclear power station built for the UK, and Anglesey lies at the heart of the Welsh-speaking Wales. So it's about the Welsh-speaking area, and you see that here almost 60% of the population speaks this language, and then there are proportionately very less people who are non-native speakers here. There was a concern by the local authority about the potential impact of the project's workforce on the local Welsh language, and what kind of impact it would have on the lifestyle in general. So the local planning authority was really concerned about it, and it also highlighted the significance of the language to its social and cultural fabric, and not only for the region but also for the country. So the local authority here came up with supplementary planning guidance that explores potential impact via a set of questions. Eventually project what was the outcome of this impact assessment. The project was considered important to reduce the out migration of the island residents there, and it was also, because of the process followed, it was instrumental in enhancing communities' facility and services, and including those facilities which were used for promoting the language. So that was about the culture and language. Now we'll look into another key element now considered in AIA, that is land acquisition, resettlement and livelihoods. So you reflect and think of number of people who are displaced because of numerous development projects, such as displacement from mining project, hydropower dams. So how many people are the villages have to be shifted or relocated? So mostly displaced people are the low income people or the vulnerable community. Often it happens because of the weak governance and legislation, as it's noted in literature. Resettlement involves the planned relocation of people and communities between locations. So this kind of resettlement can happen both voluntarily or involuntarily. So whenever voluntary resettlement takes place, meaning when we say voluntary resettlement, we mean where people are willing to shift by their choice. And whenever this happens, it is less problematic. Also, care has to be taken for free prior informed consent, so that the people know what is going to happen with them and what's really happening on the place. Then they should not decide or give you consent under hidden information. So they should have all the information, plus they should be free to choose, and they should not really choose under pressure, and they should have sufficient time to decide upon it. So it's important that free, prior and informed consent is taken, and we see it involuntary settlement when there is lack of consent. So when people have not given consent and still they are displaced, then it is called involuntary resettlement, or when there is refusal for the settlement. So displacement can be two types. So when displacement happens, it's just not the physical relocation, but it can be of two nature. One, the physical displacement. So where relocation, the people are relocated, or there is loss of shelter, so they have to leave their home and then build a home in some other place. And another another kind of displacement is economic displacement. So in that, loss of access to assets. So wherever they were generating their livelihood, they are no longer able to access it. This can happen because of the prohibition, or there's something coming in between. So there can be economic displacement as well. So these are the two kind of displacement which you see. So displacement, why it really happens, displacement can happen because of lawful expropriation, which means legal taking away. So the government can take it legally for the larger purpose, larger public purpose, and that taking can happen both for the temporary reason or for the permanent reason. And displacement can also happen due to restrictions of the rights. So you might protect certain areas and you would not allow people to use it. So that also leads to a displacement. So that can also happen. You could restrict the use of land for the original owners. You could buy that land, or you can just restrict that land. It is important to manage, when such kind of things happen, it is important to manage the resettlement properly, as it can have damaging long-term impact on the resettled communities. So there's a lot of negative impact which could happen and could happen for generations. So you may find IFC World Bank standards on land acquisition and involuntary settlements. You would also see IFC handbook for preparing the resettlement action plan. You would also see the World Bank's involuntary resettlement source book. And in all of these, a lot of emphasis is laid on community consultation. So it's very important that the community is consulted throughout the project life cycle, not just during the design process or the project implementation time, but during the life cycle of it. And they also play a central role in preparing the resettlement action plan. It is suggested that good planning and consultation is beneficial for both the developer and for the community. We also see that European Investment Bank Environmental and Social Handbook also focuses on this. You can look at chapter 6. The link is provided to you for this to have a deeper look into it. In India, we have a right to fair compensation and transparency in Land Acquisition and Rehabilitation Resettlement Act 2013. So this act makes provision for land acquisition, how they have to be compensated, how the rehabilitation has to happen, and how the resettlement plan has to be prepared. So I have provided you with the example case study here, Chhattisgarh Road Connectivity Project. This was prepared by Public Works Department, Government of Chhattisgarh for Asian Development Bank. So another emerging impact area, if you look into, that's the climate change. So in our initial first week, we had talked about this and how do we really assess the impact in this domain. So there are two key areas whenever we talk about climate change, we assess the impact. So we talk about mitigation and adaptation. So while considering mitigation, you look into how to minimize a project's greenhouse gas emissions. So mitigation majorly concerns with reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions, whereas when you look at adaptation, when we talk about adaptation, you ensure that the project will be resilient to the impact of the climate change. So whatever will happen will come, your project will be able to cope up with those kind of changes. You may know that the climate change is ultimate cumulative impact. So it's a form of a cumulative impact. It's not just happening with one project or one kind of activity, but with numerous projects and numerous activity coming together. And you may look back and think of all the drivers of environmental change we talked about in our previous week. So when we say that it's a cumulative impact, meaning it is not happening because of one project, but all the development work together, including our activities. So there are practical constraints in the areas like pertaining to time frame of EIA versus time frame of climate change. There are also issues about uncertainty, and there are a lot of interdependent factors, and which really makes the evaluation very complex. However, inclusion of climate change in EIA has been promoted a lot through regulation guidelines and also training and also by public engagement. So we see that EU has published guidance on how to integrate climate change and biodiversity, which we're going to further see in the method section also. I've provided you the link here. Then you also see the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment has also published guidance on climate change. So now moving on to another emerging impact area, we see ecosystem services. So conceptually, just to reinforce, you have seen this before also. So conceptually, ecosystem services are the services provided by environment to people. So what kind of services environment gives to us? We had seen this in the previous week lecture too. They are typically divided into provisioning services like that, like they provide food, water, minerals and other products. Then you have regulating services such as carbon sequestration, water purification, cultural services like recreational or cultural experiences, and then supporting services like you have production, nutrient cycle. So all these are provided majorly for typologies you see as per the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. So ecosystem services are often treated as commodity. So in this concept, you treat this as a commodity. We look at the demand and also quantify the services we get. So we see that how much we really require this. Sometimes even monetary value is placed onto the services, and review of ecosystem services considered as comprehensive and meaningful way of communicating with public and influencing stakeholders. So it's been effective in a way. However, the concept is also said to be human-centric. So it's more like looking at like what benefits we get and breaks down the component of environment into number of benefits. So ecosystem services have been acknowledged and addressed, like we see the International Finance Corporation IFC performance standard PS6 on biodiversity. Then performance standard requires general avoidance of impact on ecosystem services where possible, and identification of protection of priority ecosystem services. So it's been highlighted by the IFC. Likewise, you also see the European Bank for Reconstruction and Redevelopment, and then also the draft of EIA directives. Also, you see they have also provided the guidelines. So these were the all the emerging impact areas which we see. We had seen equality, we saw the culture and language, we saw the land acquisition, resettlement and livelihoods, climate change, ecosystem services. So now we'll look at broader impact consideration, risk, resilience and cumulative impact. So when we look at risk, what we are really concerned of, we look at what risk in events are such as like floods or earthquake can pose to the project. So what risk they pose on the project. So when we consider the risk at the EIA level, we see that what if such kind of things happen, what will happen to the project. So we find out apart from that, we find out what risks are there if any changes happen to the political by people's activity, which will adversely impact the project and increase other form of risk. So we also look into that. So when we try to understand the term risk is the probability of an event occurring into consequences if it occurs. So the probability and the kind of impact. So that together gives us indication of risk. And then trying to understand the probability, likelihood in usual normal project, like if we think about sugar industry, in its construction and operation phase, the probability of some impacts are high, such as like noise is going to happen and dust is going to be generated, but their impact may be temporary or then it would be less. Whereas the chances of accidents would be lower, but if it happens, the impact would be very high. So that is what we try to understand through the probability and its relationship with the risk and the consequences. So in the image here published by World Economic Forum, you can see the global risk. You see example of perceived economic risk, geopolitical risk, societal risk and environmental risk. On the x-axis you see the increasing likelihood, and on the y-axis you can see increasing impact. You see the environmental risk has high likelihood and high impact. So you can see it here. And then we also see what kind of risk what a project can pose to environment and people. So by itself, like what it has, what risk it has from the outside, as well as what the project itself has risk to the environment and people, and such if any kind of accident happens. So you may also note that different stakeholders, people in different contexts would interpret risk in different ways. So this would also vary from country to country, context to context, and like for some, what kind of casualty would be considered intensive enough, and which would be acceptable for some other context and country. So IFC Performance Standard 1 and EC directives, they all promote like identification and management of environment and social risk. So now we'll look into the impact on resilience. So that was about the risk. Now we'll move on to resilience. So usually we plan, we presume that changes will be slow. So it will happen gradually, and we can predict. So we are assuming that whatever is going to happen, we are going to predict it. But in realistic in real life, how disasters like flood, volcanic eruption, pandemic, economic downturn, power outrages, all have been happening very suddenly. So we have not been able to predict well in advance, and it has happened suddenly, not really gradually. Um, so resilience, when we talk about resilience, it's about developing the ability to deal and cope with such abrupt changes rather than being very protective about it. So we would be required to familiarize ourselves with the principles of resilience, like how we really cope up with these kind of changes and sudden changes. So we also need to understand the importance of threshold or tipping point. So our systems, like trying to understand the tipping point here, so our systems have certain ability to recover from any kind of impact or any kind of changes which happens, any disturbance which happens. So we usually recover from that, but when it crosses certain thresholds, so when it happens at a certain limit, then the system reaches to a new state, and it is quite possible that change would be very difficult, and it might be not possible to go back. So that is what we really mean by tipping point. Further, we need to understand slow variables. So like climate, soil, global economic systems, or social network. These are all slow variables which change slowly in due course of time, but they also protect our other faster moving variables such as habitat, species, communities, and individuals. So they protect them. So when these variables are damaged, then the other system which we are talking about, the environment, that really gets damaged. So our protective cover is ruined. So we need to understand these terminology when we are talking about slow variables and when we are talking about the tipping point. So as a planner or some project proponent or a community, it is important for us to have, when we are talking about resilience, it's important for us to have variety, diversification in every aspect so that we can cope up with any kind of sudden change, drastic change. It's important that we build redundancy and duplicates to allow one failure to be recovered by another system and through another section. So Resilience Alliance has also developed a resilient assessment framework. So that was about the resilience. Now coming to the last point, we'll look into the cumulative impact. So we did talk about this term before. So think how much impact of one project would make and how all the project together put in a larger time period collectively make. So what kind of impact would happen? Because of the collective impact, the impact would be significant, whereas it would be insignificant when we consider in the individual case. So looking at some of the given definition as defined by US Council of Environmental Quality, cumulative effects is the impact on the environment which results from the incremental impact. So incremental, you may pay attention to this, which happens gradually, of the action when added to the other past, present, and also of the future. And other example definition we see is from Government of Canada, where changes to the environment that are caused by an action in combination with other past, present, and future human actions. So that is what about the cumulative impact, and then we see that cumulative impacts are categorized in these types. You can see that there can be time crowded, which means when impact are so close in time, like they are happening very quickly, that effect of one is not really the impact is removed before the next one comes. So then the recipient's sensitivity is damaged. Further, we see that it's the space crowded, can be of space crowded type, where impact of various activities are too close to each other. So then impact of one and the other is all concentrated. So for example, effluent from multiple factories into one stretch of river. So river is taking waste from one, but then many other factories are also, so that impacts the health of the river. Cumulative health of the river is affected by that. Then when we see other category, which is synergistic, where different types of impact interact to produce qualitative and quantitatively different impacts. So when two impacts come together, it produces another kind of impact. So for example, you see the two pollutants interact to make more harmful third pollutant. And the other categories is nibbling, which is like the incremental erosion of our resources until there is a significant change. So continuously something is getting lost, and then the significant change happens. Like habitat fragmentation, where the habitat gets divided and then it's totally lost, and the loss of green fields from the urban areas. So all these things, it's like in bits and pieces happen, and then eventually it makes a significant change. So we had seen that there are numerous activities like agriculture, fishing, which have high impact in terms of scale at global level, but do not fall in the ambit of EIA. So entire first week when we talked about, we saw a lot of things which really do not come under EIA. So all those things can be, when we really look at cumulative impact assessments, can be covered in this. Also, there has been emphasis to include even cultural impact assessment as a cumulative impact while reviewing cumulative impact. Cumulative impacts have been introduced in many countries legally, such as you can see in New Zealand and Canada. We look at some of the useful methodologies and also discuss its limitation in the methods section, so we'll be covering this part as well. So in these two parts, like we saw the part 1 of this lecture in two parts, we discussed range of impact areas addressed through EIA process, and depending on EIA system, some or all of these impacts may require analysis and evaluation. And you're seeing that health, social and other non-biophysical impacts are either in the process considered, not at all considered, or inadequately considered. So there's a change in like what we study in the theory and how what really goes in the practice. So summarizing what we covered today. So in this lecture we covered the range of impact areas addressed through the EIA process, and in the previous week we had seen all the status, environmental status. So you see that what all we are able to cover, how we are able to cover and what we are not able to cover, what's the restriction of it, and how the process itself is evolving. So we discussed the socioeconomic impact, health and safety, and then we reviewed the emerging impact areas. Then we also looked at the wider impact consideration. So these were the references for today, and there are also the suggested watch and read for you to delve deeper into the subject, and any case studies if you wish to. Please feel free to ask questions. Let us know about any concerns you have. Do share your opinion, experiences, and also share your suggestions. Looking forward to interacting and co-learning with you while exploring the subject of environmental impact assessment. Thank you.